We're next going to move from Edinburgh to Dublin. So that's a very appropriate move. And it's a pleasure for me to invite my friend and long-time collaborator, Dr. Anna McSweeney, who's assistant lecturer in the Department of History of Art and Architecture at Trinity College in Dublin. She specialises in the art and architecture of Al-Andalus and North Africa, with a focus on the Alhambra, Islamic art in Spain, and the movement of objects and images across cultures. She holds a PhD from SOAS, the University of London, in the study of Paterna ceramics in Mudéjar, Spain, so knows this region and its ceramic history very well. Before joining Trinity, she held research and teaching positions at the University of Sussex, the Warburg Institute, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the project that she was involved in there, and the Forum Transregionale Studien in Berlin. Her publications include the monograph From Granada to Berlin, the Alhambra Cupola, and co-edited volumes such as Orientalism and Spain, 2017, and the publications that we've worked on together through the Crafting Medieval Spain project. She's currently director of the MPhil in History of Art and Architecture at Trinity College Dublin, and collaborates with major museums and institutions, including the V&A and the Museo Arqueológico Nacional in Madrid. So thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you, Mariam.
Gracias, Marianne. Muchísimas gracias. And thank you. I'd like to thank the museum for allowing me to be back in Valencia. I haven't been in...
I'm going to speak in English, but I welcome questions in Spanish, and I hope it's understandable. What I want to talk about today is... So it's related, very closely related, actually, to the collections of Spanish ceramics in London and in Edinburgh that we have in Dublin, in the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin. So I want to tell you some more about how we have those collections, what they are, and how we came across them, or we acquired those collections, important collections of ceramics. I want to touch as well on two other tiny collections of ceramics in Ireland, mainly so I can show them to you and you can tell me what they are, because I don't know. And I want to, I suppose my perspective is one of a lecturer in art history, so I teach students. And I want to explain as well how the ceramic collection of Spanish ceramics in the museum has been really important in my teaching of history of art in Trinity College Dublin. So how do I work with students with these ceramics? And what you see in this image here are some students from our final year project, where they were examining, really for the first time with students, this is earlier this year, it's a very new project, looking at the collection of Spanish lusterware that we have at the National Museum, much of which had not been looked at before at all. It has not been published. It has been catalogued, but with very basic cataloguing from the 1890s. So what we have is something very basic information about these ceramics. We have around 30 pieces of ceramic from in the collection. Here are some more. And they are a mix of ceramics from the 15th century to the 20th century. So with students, the students have worked to study this collection and to really understand the provenance and the histories and the connections between these ceramics and others in different collections. I was also lucky enough to be able to invite colleagues, including Mariam, as well as other colleagues from centres in the UK, to come for a study day in the summer on Islamic art in Ireland. So to come to Ireland and to look at the collection we have in the National Museum, and to try to also understand more of what we have, not only of ceramics, but of other objects as well. So this is really to show you this project which is just beginning, and to introduce it to you, as well as to show you the work I have started with a maker who is a contemporary potter who works with the lustre technique in Ireland. So some institutional history. This is the National Museum of Ireland Decorative Arts and History, which is, since 1997, has been located in an ex-British Army barracks in Dublin, so along the Liffey, the River Liffey. Excuse me. It's a fantastic building, not necessarily fantastic for a museum collection, but nevertheless a fantastic building. It's called Collins Barracks, after Michael Collins, the hero of Irish independence. So it's Collins Barracks, National Museum of Decorative Arts and History. But this collection that's now housed here is the collection of decorative arts. We separately have a natural history museum and an archaeological collection, as well as a folklore collection. But all these different museums were once part of one single museum, which was founded in Dublin, it was the National Museum, so it was founded out of the Royal Dublin Society. So this is a history that's very linked to the history of the V&A and the history of the Edinburgh Museum, because Ireland was under British rule when it was formed. So just like Edinburgh, the museum in Ireland, so the Museum it was called the Science and Art Museum. This was founded as essentially a branch of the South Kensington Museum. So it emerged from the Royal Dublin Society, which was a society established in 1731, and the Royal Irish Academy, established in 1785. And it followed really the great industrial exhibition in Dublin, which took place in 1853, in the light of all the other exhibitions, world fairs that were happening at that time, at that point. It was in 1877 that a law was passed. The Science and Art Museum Ireland Act was passed to establish the Museum of Science and Art in Dublin as an offshoot, essentially, of the South Kensington Museum. It had its own separate direction and it could acquire separately, but essentially its collecting practices were based on the South Kensington model, as they called it, led by Sir Henry Cole, in terms of the acquisitions, display and layout of this museum. So when I saw, Felix, your pictures, your photograph of the interior of Edinburgh, this is very similar to the layout that you can see here on the bottom right from 1892 and the interior of the Museum of Science and Art in Dublin. Those interiors with iron interiors, with double height, double levels, and the layout was modelled very much on that. So London policy dictated the collection of an international as well as a national collection. And this is actually a very important thing to remember, because it was a short period of time when this museum in Ireland was acquiring things from abroad, international material, so things from Spain, from Italy, from around Europe and further afield. So we actually have the Captain Cook collection of the South Seas in the National Museum as well. So we have some very global collections as part of this. But it was in the beginning of the 20th century, the policy changed, and the National Museum changed to being a place which collected Irish material. So Irish archaeology, Irish history, things of relevance to Ireland. So this period is very important to understand, because this late 19th century is when the museum was able to acquire and was encouraged to acquire these, for example, ceramics, as well as many other decorative arts materials from around the world. And they now today are becoming an important part of the museum again. But because of Irish history, for most of the 20th century, this more global collection has been put aside in favour of the Irish collection, displaying Irishness through the museum. So it's had this long history of not really being known about. For that reason, the Spanish ceramics have not really been well known or publicised, and the Islamic material actually in the museum, apart from the Spanish ceramics, the Islamic material is relatively unknown. This collection in the 19th century was formed really in four ways. The Industrial Exhibition of 1853, a lot of that material went into the new museum. So these are transfers as well from the Royal Dublin Society and the Academy. We have donations and bequests from well-travelled Irish citizens, many of whom worked in the colonial administration of Britain. So we have Irish figures who went to India, for example, under the Great Britain and worked there and came back to Ireland, and their collections go into the Irish collection. We have acquisitions directly from dealers and auction houses, which is, I think, largely how much of the early Spanish ceramics was acquired. And then we have duplicate material as well that was received from South Kensington. So in the same way that the Edinburgh Museum received, I don't understand yet whether it was the unwanted material from South Kensington or the very valuable material that they wanted to share. I'm not clear on the relationship there yet. I think probably a mix of both, exactly. And those are the ways that this collection was formed. So 1877, we have the foundation of the Science and Art Museum. As I said, very connected then to, as you can see, the South Kensington Museum. Incidentally, the facade of which you see here on the right, upper right, was designed by an Irishman. We have the Edinburgh Museum on the top left and the Dublin Museum, which was initially placed in Leinster House, which was a great house which is now the seat of the Irish government, but which was then put into a purpose-built building in the 1890s. So the Act of Parliament established this, and the intention was very similar to the intention behind the establishment of the Edinburgh and South Kensington museums, so that the people of Ireland would obtain the fullest opportunity of improvement in the cultivation of industrial and decorative arts. So it was about self-improvement and the bettering of arts and crafts and industry within Ireland. This became the National Museum of Science and Arts, and responsibility passed in 1914 to the Dublin administration. And after that point, really after 1907, we had a new director, and we have no more non-Irish material really being purchased after that point. Here is an overview, hopefully coming up now. I'm not sure why not. I'll keep pressing and it'll happen. Here is just an overview, unlabeled, because I'm going to show you some of these in detail, of some of the pieces of Spanish lusterware that we have in the collection. A mix, as you can see, of 19th, 20th century and of much earlier material. And I will show some of these in detail, but just to give you an idea of the kinds of things we have and of the variety that we've been looking at over the past year. One of the best pieces, one of the most important pieces in the collection is this large dish. You can see it's nearly over 43 centimeters in diameter, which is in excellent condition and is one of the highlights of the collection. Really, you can see its reverse there with the eagle on reverse there. This led me, this has an early date. You can see that we followed the South Kensington model in numbering our acquisitions and our pieces in the museum. 1885 is the date of the acquisition of this piece. So it led me I was looking into the register of objects to understand precisely how the museum and from where the museum acquired this object alongside others. So it seems that 1885, I don't think we have purchased from the Bernal sale, but it seems that in 1885 we purchased extensively from the Castellani sale. This was the sale of Alessandro Castellani in Rome after his death in 1884. Castellani was a goldsmith and antiquarian, and he seems to have been involved in the making and sale of antiquities very much at all high levels throughout the capitals of Europe in the 19th century. And the sale of the two-day sale of his collection happened in 1885. And the register of objects indicates that this was a Hispano-Moresque brackets Malaga 15th century. And I think along the lines of what Mariam was saying about These museums in the 19th century acquiring this material, not knowing precisely that it was from Valencia, and often through Italian collections and sales within Italy, I think holds true also for the Irish collection. So you can see this purchase was the most expensive that Ireland made from the Castellani sale at £52. We made some other purchases as well. So this is the catalogue cover of 1884 is the date of the sale. 1885 is when it entered into the collection. The pieces entered into the collection in Ireland. So you can see the description up on the top right of the plate within the catalogue of Castellani, which is online, so you can look for other acquisitions there. And on the left, the front cover of that. So it seems that some other of our objects in the collection also came from this same sale. And this piece really fascinates me because, well, it's a fantastic piece. It's 49 centimeters, it's huge. It's one of the most important pieces in our collection. But it has these very distinctive green, it's copper, I presume it's copper which has dripped onto the dish and when it's in the kiln. And I am presuming that happens during the third firing. Let me just point that out with the laser pointer, actually. Here, you can see the two lines. So if the dish is turned the other way round, this is, I presume, what's happening within the third firing of this luster piece inside the kiln. Nevertheless, it is one of the star pieces in the Castellani sale. You can see it's one of the only ones, it's in fact the only piece that's illustrated in the Castellani sale catalogue. And you can see the lines of green here, which are still, I presume they are the drips of the copper pigment, which must have come from a mixing of the kilns. I actually don't, Jam, I'd love your opinion on this because I don't understand exactly at which point. So afterwards we can discuss that, I hope. So here you can see the description of the dish here on the previous page, and it doesn't mention the green drips as a flaw. In fact, it's not mentioned at all, and here the matching of the two pieces. The third of the dishes that we purchased from the Castellani sale is this Hispano-Moresque dish, as it's described, which was bought for £33, and it's 48 centimetres in diameter. And you can see here, this is another of the 1885 purchases. Here is how they are described. One of them is described as Valencia, another as late 15th or 16th century, and the first one I showed you as Malaga. So there is some knowledge, but also some confusion about where these plates came from, and a certain understanding that certainly that they come from Spain at this time, even though they're being purchased in an Italian sale. We have two Albarelli. This is the pair. You can see the front and back of the pair here, also purchased from that important 1885 sale, when it seemed, or 1884 sale rather, when the museum was expanding its collection to include these Spanish lusterware. This is a pair, obviously, of Albarelli from this period. And what really fascinated me recently about this, and I've done very little research about this heraldry, and I also am not an expert in heraldry, but what I have found out is that it is perhaps the family for whom they were made, but I would very much appreciate feedback on that so I can understand it for myself. These were described not as Spanish Albarelli, even though they are very clearly connected to the other pieces that are sold in the Castellani sale. Instead, within the register of objects and in the sale, they are sold under faience Siculo-Arabe, and they are entered into the museum register as Siculo-Arabian vases. So they're understood as being from Sicily for some reason. There's no reason why, because they are very clearly related to the other pieces. But they are separated in the sale and henceforth separated within the museum register of objects. And even today, this is how they're described in the museum stores. None of these objects are on display in Dublin at the moment, although I hope to change that. So I was looking into this heraldry, and I'll just show it to you again, actually, so you can see more clearly. This is what I'm looking at. This is two pieces, and they both have the same distinctive three-part heraldry, which I'm wondering, and this is only, as I said, from very brief research into this heraldry, they seem to be eels. I wondered whether they are eels, and they are related to the family of the Anguillara, and that's probably not how you pronounce it in Italian, which is in Lazio, near Rome. So this is from their tomb in Rome. This is an important 15th century Roman family who were linked very much to the Orsini family and to important acquisitions at that time. I don't know, it seems to me to be quite a similar heraldry, but as I said, I'm not sure. It might be related to that or might not. So the Castellani sale it is really when most of the very important pieces entered into the Irish collection. That's when we have the significant 15th century Manises ware which comes into the Irish collection. We also have later acquisitions, some later acquisitions, but mostly what comes in as part of this around 30-piece collection in Dublin are bequests. The bequest of Thomas Henry Longfield is an important one. Thomas Henry Longfield was the keeper of the museum throughout most of the second half of the 19th century, and he travelled around Italy. So most of his travels were around Italy, and he collected around Italy as well as throughout Germany. So it's likely that what he left to the museum in 1909 are part of objects that he collected during his travels in Italy. I'm not aware that he came to Spain, but he might have done. But what we have in the collection from his bequest include this Alhambra-style vase, which is clearly of 19th century production. And it's described in the register as in the Hispano-Moresque style, modern English, ? Probably by Morgan of Fulham. So there is an assumption within the registry of objects that it is possibly made by William de Morgan, who is the potter who is making replica lustreware and working with these ideas in Britain at the time. However, I doubt that because I haven't found similar pieces in the Morgan genre, in the kind of material he's making, and it looks more to me much more like it's Laceramo, like it's being made by as a reproduction here in Valencia. And I couldn't resist including a photograph that actually Mariam took of me in 2009 outside of when we visited Laceramo factory in the exterior to understand this long-standing production of replica wares. It interested me that in Laceramo they were making Alhambra-style vases, so replicas which also referred to the Nasrid history, not only Manises replicas. So there was a kind of a change of a kind of Orientalist ideas in Spain in the 20th century and late 19th century, which were being made by the factory there. We collected more in the museum of this kind of material. So 1896, we acquired, I think through transfer from South Kensington Museum, this piece that you can see here in 3 views, which is a copy of the very well-known piece which is in the Musée de Cluny in Paris, made, and it's acknowledged in the register that it's made by Laceramo in Benicalap in Valencia. So here is the register of objects, and it reads facsimile reproduction, Spanish luster dish, enameled pottery, bronze, luster and blue over cream ground. Spanish, reproduced by Senor Ross, Valencia, £3, 9 shillings. So this is the register of objects records a number, about 9 objects that were made as a reproduction, and they are called facsimile, which I think is an interesting facsimile reproduction, an interesting period of acquisition in the 19th century, clearly intended to expand the collection in places that it was missing material. Here is the National Museum of Ireland object, and on the right is an image of the Cluny original, which is from the 1400s, of course, from Valencia, similar size, almost exactly the same. And you look then at the V&A collection and you have another replica of this. And I'm sure Edinburgh has replicas, as probably many museums do as well today. So this is described as Laceramo Benicalap Valencia. What I want to understand more clearly is, was the museum in Ireland buying independently? So was the Dublin Museum buying from Lateramo independently of the South Kensington Museum? Because in the register of objects in Dublin, we have the name of Senor José Ros of Valencia, or were they taking what the South Kensington Museum didn't want? I actually think, I think possibly they were buying independently from the entries in the register. It seems to me there might be that potential. So this is the collection that we have in the National Museum, and really in about after the Thomas Henry Longfield bequest that we have from 1909, collection of this material stopped. Not only did collection stop, but exhibition and engagement with this material stopped. So it stopped being displayed, it stopped being available. And it's only since in the last 10 years in Dublin that the Spanish collection and much of the ceramics collection is visible as a visitor to the museum. It's on open storage. So it's not displayed like an exhibition, but it is visible on open storage, so you can see it if you go there. But there is still an overwhelming focus in the Dublin Museum, in the National Museum in Dublin, on Irish collections and the Irish archaeology of this. Another museum that's very important and that I mentioned actually in relation, Felix, to your presentation is the Hunt Museum in Limerick. Now, Limerick is a city in the southwest of Ireland, and it was bequeathed a collection of medieval art, antiquities, classic, a huge selection of material in 1976. So this is a collection that was acquired in the 1930s and 1940s by John and Gertrude Hunt. They acquired it on the market. They bought and they sold to the Burrells, they sold to many different people. They had a gallery, they had a dealership in London in the 1930s and 40s, and they were collecting material. And their own material, their own collection, they left to the Irish state in 1976, and this is now on display in the Hunt Museum. They don't have lustreware. Unfortunately, they didn't keep any lustreware. I don't know if they dealt in lustreware at all. They didn't keep very good records at all. But what they do have, and it's on display, and it's beautifully displayed and very treasured in the collection, is this very large bowl, which is described as Teruel or Paterna 14th century. And it's always strikes me when I go into this collection it's a very striking piece, and it's very visible within the collection itself, and yet little is known about it. I've put the reverse on it here so you can see that it was clearly taken from a wall, and this is what is described in the sparse notes that we have of this. Largest one known, built into a wall, preserved, portrait of a woman. Underneath it says head of a king, and beneath that Picasso dish. It cost 35,000 pesetas, and this is all that is known really about the acquisition. There's been quite a lot of provenance research done on the Hunt collection because it was under scrutiny in the last 20 years, really, because of the association of the Hunts with collecting Jewish objects from Jewish families in the 1940s. So there was a whole a deep investigation done into the provenance of all of the material, all of the collection. But I mean, really little is known about this piece other than it is the largest one known, and it's built into a wall. I don't think it is the largest one known. It's at the dimensions that it has, but it reminded me very much of the Paterna ware ceramics that I've studied for my PhD, in which I became very familiar with and very fond of. In particular, the form of the female, of the woman, and her crown. And of course, this will be familiar to all of you here today, this kind of green and manganese ware on a tin glaze. This is a much smaller piece, and it's very damaged, of course. In terms of its form, it's also reminiscent of these deep dishes that we have at the V&A that Mariam showed us earlier. This one above is the largest at 51 centimeters 20 centimeters in height. We have similar examples of luster bowls of this shape from the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Lyon. Here you can see this luster bowl of a deep shape. But of course, the piece I showed you from the Hunt collection is not luster, it's green and brownware. So comparisons need to be looked within that context. And the former collection of the Museo de Cerámica in Barcelona had this deep dish of Paterna ceramics with a similarly, I can't really see, I think it's just a lead glaze exterior. So it's as you can see, I'm struggling to really understand where this piece is this piece Paterna, is it Teruel, is it somewhere else entirely? It's taken from a wall. The piece in Edinburgh or in Glasgow in the Burrell collection is clearly taken from a wall too. So is this coming from a similar place, or where are we taking this from? I would really like to understand it more though, because I think it offers us an insight in Ireland into this period of making ceramics in Spain, which is otherwise unknown. We don't have other collections from the 14th century at this time in Ireland. So it would be a really interesting, it would be great for the museum to understand more about it. We also have just opened in our National Gallery in Ireland a new exhibition on Picasso and his studio. And there's a real interest in that, in the Picasso ceramics, because we have a long tradition of pottery making in Ireland. And so there are ways to interest people, visitors and students in this material that I would like to explore more. We have many other collections of ceramics, and I'm certain that there are other luster ceramics in some of the private houses, the big houses we have in Ireland. I know that we have them, but as part of our national collections, we also have this much later collection of blue and whiteware, which I am including here only because I would also like to know more about this 18th century, which I think it is, ceramics. Because it was donated to the Crawford Art Gallery, which is one of our national collections of art in Cork, in the south of Ireland. And it was bequested in 1919 by Joseph Stafford Gibson. He had lived in Madrid for 40 years. He travelled throughout Spain, and he especially did some watercolours and sketches in Teruel and Albarracín, and then left his collection of, I think it's about 15 pieces of ceramics to the Crawford Gallery. And they, again, are under extensive renovations at the moment, but they are keen to understand more about this collection and to display it alongside the watercolours that they have from his bequest. So these are the kind of romantic views of Albarracín made between 1891 and 1907. I want to just speak now for the last few minutes or so. How long do I have? Yeah, about 10 minutes. For the last 10 minutes or so, about how we activate, how I have worked with these collections with students in the museum, but also how we are working with contemporary potter in Ireland to bring these collections to life. So with students, these are fourth year students as well as, so third and fourth year students who are studying the art and architecture of Spain and North Africa with me as part of a degree in history of art and architecture at Trinity College. And these students are doing history of art degrees, but many of them are very interested in museum studies, and they want to work with museums and work as curators, or at least have access to and experience of museum collections. It's very difficult to get that kind of experience today in museums in Ireland, and I think in more generally, internships and study positions within museums are very rare now and difficult for students. So I bring my students into the museum as part of their degree, and one of their assessed pieces of work is to catalogue and study and understand these ceramics. This helps the museum because they have no specialist in ceramics, Islamic material, Spanish material. They have no specialist in this. So I can bring in the specialism that I have and that the students are developing. and they can work then with the collection and augment their catalogue research, so to say. So here we are, last year, the beginning of this year, actually January, looking at the Albarelli and the Castellani acquisitions in particular, doing basic activities such as measuring and confirming all the different material evidence that we have in the museum itself, in the register of objects, as well as looking at the practice of making these objects. So as you will all know, the luster technique is a complex one and a very difficult one to achieve with success. The success rate as we know, is a very low one. So looking closely at these objects helps us to understand that. In particular, looking with someone who has experience of making them. And the person on the right, who you see here, on the left rather, is Mark Campton, who has worked with us. He's a potter who has worked with us on to understand how these ceramics are made. So Mark is the son of Edgar Campton. And Edgar Campton worked with Alan Cager-Smith in his Aldermaston studios as part of a real revival of or renaissance of luster technique in Britain in the 20th century. Edgar Campton worked with the luster technique, and his son moved to Ireland and became a potter in Kilkenny about 30 years ago, and set up his pottery there. And he now makes luster ceramics. And you can see here on the left 2 of the pieces from the National Museum of Ireland collection, and on the right 2 Albarelli that Mark Campton has made recently. He had an exhibition in 2024, and these are part of that exhibition. So he built himself a wood-fired kiln in his pottery, called the Bridge Pottery in Kilkenny. It's the only one we have in Ireland. I mean, this is a kind of extraordinary, for us it was a fantastic find, to find a potter who was making luster using this technique that was as much as possible trying to replicate the technique described by Pico Passo, for example, and the techniques that were used here in Valencia, in Manises. So he described. We went down to his studio as a university group, and he showed us the technique and the practice, and students could understand, and I could understand more fully exactly how the challenges not only of working with lusterware, but also of doing it in Ireland in the very different conditions we have in Ireland for firing than you might have, for example, in Valencia. And I have the short video there just of him showing us how he inscribes his ceramics on the wheel here. So this is the student group when we went down earlier this year to his pottery, and he showed us the different types of wood he used, his exact recipes. And it was a way of bringing to life this collection that otherwise sits in the back room of the museum in Dublin, and is studied by these students who are very enthused about it, but who need to connect it to the tradition of making and bring it to life. So that's the project that we're doing, and hopefully it will continue with connecting these Spanish ceramics in Dublin, in the Museum of Dublin, with the other collections that were created at the same time around Britain. I think it would be a very interesting thing to understand more fully exactly where all these ceramics come from, and to connect them then with contemporary makers, people like Arturo Mora, for example, and their work that they're done today. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. It was very special to be able to meet Mark Campton in June when we came over to Dublin for the conference that you mentioned. In terms of the acquisitions, I think you'll find from the sort of relationship between the V&A and Dublin and Edinburgh is going to be useful for you, I think, to come and look at the V&A archives. Because, I mean, I haven't looked into this in a lot of detail, but I have come across, when I'm looking at things, other types of objects, there are written into the correspondence, recommendations of, recommended for Edinburgh, recommended for Dublin. So I think understanding that relationship will be really interesting.
Definitely, definitely the next step. Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any questions from our audience? Tim has a question.
We have in Oxford runs of the personal papers, both of Robinson and of Fortnum. And I think we have an annotated copy by Fortnum of the Castellani sale catalogue. I think he was sent there on behalf of the V&A. And we can certainly have a look and see, what's there. Whether there is anything in Robinson's papers about his recommendations to Dublin and Edinburgh, I don't know. I should just one tiny recommendation for students. I have a vivid memory 30 or 40 years ago of going to the Aldermaston Pottery and after a lustre firing and being set by Alan to the laborious job of cleaning all the soot off lusterwares. It would be a great thing for your students to have to do. It's incredibly rewarding to see the brilliance of lustre emerge from under this thick layer of soot.
Or not emerge. So he showed us the pieces. He had some test pieces that had not been cleaned, and the excitement was in the jeopardy of yes, lustre, or no, it failed. So to see that most pieces don't come through as lustrous was fascinating.
But Alan, I always used to challenge Alan and say the uncertainty must be tremendously exciting. And he said, not at all, if I could absolutely control it and get it right every time without jeopardy, that's what would make me happy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Do we have other questions?
Thank you.
Felix has a question or a comment.
If I may, well, it was absolutely fascinating to see the similarities in building the collection between Edinburgh and Dublin. And we can talk more about it later, but I really liked your presentation about what the work that you do with the students as well. And you said that these pieces, the Spanish lustreware, is not accessible to visitors, and still the students are enthusiastic about it. So how are they introduced into Spanish ceramics, Spanish lustreware? Is it through your courses, or how do they know about it?
So previously, this material was not on display. It's now in visible storage. So that means you can see it, but it's not labeled or organized, and it's quite dark. So it's hard to see. So you can access it, but not very well, which is better than nothing. And students come to it through me. So I arrange seminars in the museum, and we can access the material that way. But the museum is open to people coming and looking at this material. They just don't have the capacity to have expertise in-house, curators, and to do that. So they're studying with me, and then through that they get to, I love ceramics, so I get to go and play with ceramics with them in the seminars, which is great. Yeah. So that's the way.
I think it's an unfortunate situation in many UK and Irish museums where there are these fabulous collections, but no curators who specialise, or there are few curators and very few who specialise in the subjects that they have to curate. So.
Pero entonces los estudiantes escriben algo o con tu ayuda hacen, no sé, algún paper o algo y eso vuelve al museo?
Write a paper or something and that comes back to the museum, or does the museum have a benefit on this research? Yes, it goes back to the museum and it enters the online catalog. That information, the information they get from studying the pieces, the ceramics, and it...
Sorry, I had another question. At the great sale at Christie's a couple of years ago of Alphonse de Rothschild, there was a wing-handled vase that Christie's catalogued as a fake. This was, very good quality luster. To me, it didn't look like a fake, but it was first recorded in 1865. So I wondered when your La Cheramont factories started making lusterware that could conceivably be confused with 15th century originals.
Later.
Oh, in 1890s.
Right,
for the
so 1865 is in that sense
too
early for anyone in Manises making fake luster.
Were there other people copying luster in the 19th century?
I think in the V&A we have some acquisitions in the 1880s that are revival. So maybe not made in Laceramo, but other factories already starting. But I think 1860s maybe is a bit too early. Moncloa, did they make this kind of thing also?
Some workshops. There are some
Jan was
workshops
mentioning
working
Moncloa.
in the late 19th century, there are some workshops, Santigos, La Moncloa, and here in Valencia also. The last people recorded in the 19th century is two potters from Manises, Casany and Torrent, who has been working with the pottery, but they make exactly copies of the pottery of his time. No, they don't make revival. No? But in the middle of the 19th century, there is the factory of González Valls. They make plaques, luster plaques for artesonados. So
Okay.
So there is the skill there.
the skill is there,
Yeah.
but the interest to copy models start very at the end. Exactly, we don't know when, no, but
Maybe in response to museums wanting to acquire reproduction?
I think I think it's a movement that starts with the Alhambrismo, at the end of the century, because the first building we have in Islamic or Arabic styles is from last quarter of 19th century. So it's going together now.
I mean, we have Deck working in France at an earlier period, and then there's Cantagalli. I can't remember the dates.
Yes, Cantagalli did also.
Cantagalli is making luster from the 1880s.
Yes.
1880s, yeah.
Well, and-
so there are people around, but I haven't seen a picture of that one, so I can't.
Massier in the south of France.
Okay.
They were making luster.
Anybody want to tell me about the Teruel piece?
Or
Paterna
Paterna.
piece? What do we think? I'll see if I can get back to it.
Do you have a question about the drips?
Oh, yeah.
So I just looked on Google, and the copper doesn't volatilize at the firing temperature
For
of
luster.
reflejo metálico. But I'm thinking that perhaps the plates, my understanding, are usually fired upside down on a metal structure, and perhaps the supports were somehow contaminated by a little bit of copper, and that's how it got there. Because it doesn't look
During the luster firing?
right. Because the drips, well, no.
Jan
Okay,
says
Jana,
no.
tell
It's
us.
an idea.
Tell us.
So
Tell us the answer.
These are the,
Yeah.
Well, we have seen that mostly of the production from Andalusia, mainly Sevilla, has these green dots and his green drops, because they fired. The second firing was made with other objects that was covered by this lead glaze green covering.
So,
So
it's
you think
second
yeah.
firing. So it's second firing, and then it's white with the green drops, and they still continue to make it into a luster. That's interesting.
But the way those drips have fallen, to me, suggests that this was fired at 45 degrees
Yeah.
with an object above it, and that it's
Okay.
dripped down and then dripped towards the centre. Is there any evidence for these things being fired at an angle of 45 degrees? Yeah.
Wow, 45 degrees. Well, it's a proof that how they fill the kiln, the kiln.
Stack the kiln, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like that, and sometimes it's in horizontal or drops, just top drops. So depends.
Thank you. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Because if you fired the kiln at 900 degrees to make the lead glaze,
Yeah,
the luster decoration disappeared.
it's gone. Yeah. So it must be pre the luster fire.
Pre.
Yeah.
It's
Okay. And this piece, anybody? Any suggestions?
I have a comment on this,
Yeah.
which is that
Sorry,
I
you too.
don't,
Spanish Josep has a question after.
I'm sorry, forgive me.
No.
the tradition of ceramics decorating, particularly the facades of churches, is basically a Tyrrhenian coast of Italy tradition. Is it really a...
We have it. We have it in
here.
Spain.
You do have it in Spain,
Yeah.
because a
And
lot
in
of
Morocco.
Victorian collectors were collecting these things from churches in Pisa and other places in Tuscany. And have you looked in the great corpus of Bacini?
Bacini,
of
I
Pisa?
have.
You
It's not. There
There isn't anything like that.
There are no pieces like this. Yeah, thank you. That would be, because it is clearly related to that tradition, but there are none of these.
We have one building recorded here, is San Francisco de Pina de Ebro, that has a lot of balls in the facade.
In
And-
Valencia.
In the city?
No, it's near Zaragoza.
Ah,
Sí,
yeah.
Pina de Ebro.
It's a rural area.
Pina de Ebro. And from this, we will see this evening some fragments found in Manises, of nearly this kind of decoration.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. So you think Manises, this is Manises? The same? Yeah.
Yes, but we need to bear in mind that this bowl, does it have some glazing? It's difficult to see because it's very deteriorated and there is no trace behind. Yes, but these bowls are placed not only on the walls, and this is very thick to be placed on a wall. It's not like other flat objects. It used to be used as trays or to put water on this. So perhaps it was not on a wall, but rather on a horizontal plane on a wall. In Lyon, it's called baptismal font. Well, this is not for baptism purposes, but to hold water. This is very frequent in Andalusia. Water overflows. Sometimes you find a hole on the bottom, other times there's not. And if there's a hole, there's sometimes a tube. And if there's no hole, then just water simply spills over. Thank you. Hello. As regards the green drips, what I'm going to say perhaps is not relevant, but perhaps it's worth noting that in many cases that during a second firing, the object may have this defect, white with green drips. They had to continue because it was urgent to deliver this order, or they thought perhaps that those green lines were not relevant. And this usually happens during a second firing. But this is like with the plate with the smeared armorial. But this is, in some cases you can barely tell what the armorial ornament is. Well, may I remind you that there are numerous objects from Muel and Seville. They have this as an ornament that was done on purpose. It had some relief molding. Sometimes you have magnesium, sometimes blue, sometimes green. In Muel, you tend to get green and blue. In Seville, you can have green and black. It varies. And this happens during the second firing, and then it's finished with the reflection. But here in Manises, you have not seen one such decoration. No, not in Manises. Green and with the reflection. I have not seen this. So I think that this is a high quality object from Seville. I'm not saying it's a high quality for any other reason that I haven't seen very few such a notable quality in Seville. They wanted to manufacture more and in a swifter way. I have seen some such objects. I found one at a collector's home, and he said, I bought this in Manises, and I said, I'm sorry, I beg to differ. This looks like originating in Seville, and Professor Orzuelo confirmed this. Here there are some elements, although they might seem from Manises because of the lion, that this is not typical of Manises. And Seville, could you guess a date? Contemporary to the ones in Manises, but we're talking about the very last years of the 15th century and throughout the 16th century. How interesting. Microphone, please. Microphone, please. But this could have originated in Aragon because of the golden decorative designs. There is a resemblance to what was done there. What a mystery! In Manises, as Jaime has rightly pointed out, you don't usually get green stains or drops. I have not seen this before. Sometimes, well, you know what happens with ceramics is that when a new market is open and there are many potters, these people tend to move, like with Ximena de Mislata, who moved to Barcelona. And that was the main manufacturing site in the 15th century in Barcelona. So these skilled professionals opened maybe a workshop with children who maybe only one could remain in Manises. The other one had to move, and if markets were there, where there was an interest for that kind of production, they would move there. Like Mark Hampton in Ireland or Ann Keaton Smith.
Sorry, I'm mezclando. Okay, thank you very much, Anna. Was this your real time?